I'd like to talk today about a subject that I think is extremely important, and that is embodying grace in uncertain times. So this word grace is a profound word, and it references a lot that I want to just unpack firstly before we really start looking at what does it mean to embody grace in uncertain times. If you contemplate what it is that causes you to exist at all, what propelled you out of your mother's womb, what causes you to breathe, what causes you to be interested to listen to this, what causes anything, anyone, what causes the plants and the trees and the mountains and the rivers. Well, what we see is that there's some kind of foundation, some living intelligence that is not a thing, but is animating us all, is living and breathing us all. And fundamentally, it is grace, divine presence, mystery, intelligence itself. So when we recognize this, we have a basis to see that the ground of everything that exists is grace, is fundamental goodness, is fundamental intelligence, and that we are already in and part of that. When we recognize this, we have a basis to evolve spiritually, to relax out of the dense features of ego like fear and control and defensiveness and pride and all the things that can very easily cause us to contract and devolve, particularly in overwhelming, uncertain times. So we need firstly to recognize that grace is our foundation and the foundation of everything, and that we are always in it, even with coronavirus. We also want to recognize that grace is the sustenance, the love, the blessings that miraculously somehow finds its way into our lives in ways that we don't expect. Like if you were to consider that day that you met the person who ended up becoming your best friend or your beloved spouse, and I'm sure you didn't wake up that morning thinking, right, okay, now today I'm going to meet my best friend, let's do it, let's make it happen. No. What happens is you're going about your business, and somehow you're just magnetically drawn towards someone, and there's a smile and a little joke, or you immediately just love one another and enjoy one another, and 20 or 30 years on, you feel so profoundly grateful that that person is in your life, and it's obvious that they are a gift. It's obvious when we open our eyes spiritually that so much that's here in our life we didn't earn or deserve, we didn't become worthy of it, it was just given to us. And so that it shows us that there is this force, divine force, that's always blessing and nourishing and trying to help and sustain us, and even sometimes giving us difficulties and challenges to help slough off rough edges and help us evolve and grow and thrive. And that fundamentally, somehow, we are loved by something we might not even be able to name. When we also look more deeply at transformation itself, we see that you and I aren't really the doer of transformation, that somehow when we yield to this power, this mystery, when we surrender and we allow for whatever the way is, even in the midst of our greatest challenges and sufferings, we see that while we might need to show up with sincerity and genuineness and willingness and really do our best as we tackle issues and engage our spiritual practice and be sincere and consistent with it, ultimately something opens our wings. This is the words of Rumi. He said, something opens our wings. Something makes hurt and boredom disappear. Someone fills the cup in front of us. And so we see that ultimately there is grace to help us transform the suffering and the difficulty and the obstacles that we face personally and collectively if we will open and allow that. But ultimately, and what I want to talk most about today, grace is a verb. It's not just a beautiful state, it's not just a flowery, inspirational term. It's really a way of being. It's an invitation for you and I to become more grounded in that which always is, more grounded, stabilized in the infinite source, so that we can open our heart to all that arises and grow into stronger, wiser, deeper, more compassionate, more loving, more responsive human beings. And to have the spiritual depth so we can live in the two worlds at the same time. What do I mean by that? Well, to live in the ordinary realm that we all live in. We pay our bills, we hold down jobs, we go about our ordinary business. But inside we can be abiding in the kingdom of heaven, in the boundless realms where nothing is ever changed and nothing is rocked, and where we can always find refuge. So what I'm really saying is that grace is the answer, it's the means, and it's the way that we can find a possibility of truth and beauty and goodness, even amidst this very challenging situation where our whole world is dealing with COVID-19 and its enormous and very uncertain implications. So when I feel into this coronavirus pandemic myself, I feel so many things, and I'm sure you do too. Firstly, I feel immense compassion for those who have lost loved ones, for those who are fighting for their lives in hospitals, or who are at home suffering through burning fevers. I feel immense compassion for the healthcare workers and the emergency workers and the police force, all these incredible, courageous people in society across the world who are really on the front lines of this and serving us all and helping us. And I feel immense compassion for everyone who's lost their job, for everyone who's stressed, who doesn't know how they're going to pay their rent or feed their family or survive financially, for anyone who's living alone and is lonely and feeling depressed. There is so many challenges and implications to this that are really not easy, and compassion is first and foremost in my heart, as I'm sure it is for yours. That is true and right, graceful human response right there off the bat. But I also feel something else. I also feel that this perhaps could be, and well, it seems to me to be an enormous collective spiritual initiation, a kind of John of the Cross, dark night of the soul, but on a collective level. So many of you might have heard that term that John of the Cross coined many years ago, and they've often taken it superficially to mean going through a hard time. But that's not really what Dark Night of the Soul actually is about. So I want to say a bit about that. So John of the Cross spoke about the Dark Night of the Soul as a profound transition point, a profound journey of a spiritual being going through a phase, like from one dimension of consciousness to a deeper, purer one, all the way home into absolute abiding in and as part of God, where all ego melts completely, as a time where we're entering into the void, where we can't rely on familiar reference points, even familiar spiritual practices and perspectives to guide us, where nothing that our ego has created or even used as a support, even a spiritual support, actually does the trick. We have to relax and stretch into the space ahead of us, which we don't know, and at the same time to trust the allowing of dissolving, the allowing of things to be dissolved that are no longer needed. And in the process, we find ourselves becoming purer and cleaner and more truly humble and receptive and naked in the deeper reality that has always been and always in, and that is our home. And so here we are together, where it's absolutely clear that there is nothing such thing as normal anymore. And it's day by day, and none of us know what our world's going to look like. None of us really can tell. Maybe we want reassurance, but no one can really give it. And so that throws us back into the immediacy of the present moment, and the somehow learning to relax with all of that and be graceful and yield and trust and love and learn how to accept that we have never been in control, even though we wanted to think we were. The direct, immediate truth is we're not. And ultimately, we never have been. It's a delusion that we thought we were in control. So this is the terrain of the spiritual path, of the mystical path most deeply. And so mystical and spiritual practices have a lot to offer us on how we can navigate this kind of a transition personally and collectively, beautifully, gracefully, in a way that not only helps us survive it, but helps us harness this as a tremendous opportunity for a profound leap in consciousness that is not just personal, but also collective. Helps us rise to our destiny as spiritual and human beings. And what is that? Well, Meister Eckhart, another great Christian mystic, said, "It is your destiny to see as God sees, to feel as God feels, to be as God is." And so if you've studied any spiritual tradition of the world, then what God is more than we can even name. But what God is and what you are is both infinite mystery and infinite possibility that can allow for the free flow of the most noble and beautiful qualities that our world so needs right now, that are sewn into the very fabric of your essence. They are boundless love, peace, joy, empathy, strength, intelligence, love, and so much more. So how do we begin to gain more access to this so that we can embody grace as deeply and fully as we can? So I would say that the number one thing that we must work with is to make presence our priority, our number one priority. The 14th century Kashmiri mystic Lala said something very beautiful. She said, "If inside I'm connected to what's true, my consciousness remains calm and clear." Well, I don't know about you, but I have been stepping up my practices that help me to stay connected inside to what's true and remain calm and clear, even though everything is moving and changing and shaking in ways that aren't always easy. So this is an invitation to really look freshly at your spiritual practice. And when I say your spiritual practice, I don't just mean formal meditation, although for me, and maybe for you too, that is a great aid and something that is already established in your life. If you do have a formal meditation practice, or a formal prayer practice, or a formal journaling practice, then now is the time to be prioritizing it, to really be marinating in what it is that provides you, a place of true refuge inside, where peace always is. I've just come from my meditation cushion just now, and I sat for an hour. And I always, when I let go deeply into silent sitting, which has been part of my practice for many decades now, I always feel such a deep sense of relief. I feel like a plant that is being watered again. I feel that I'm returning back to the very source of the well, of that water itself, and receive what I need to really abide in my deepest center that, of course, I don't own. It doesn't belong to a separate me. It is the center of us all. Your true nature and mine isn't two things. So if meditation is something that is already part of your practice or has been in the past, I would really encourage you to reinvigorate it. And reinvigorate it firstly by asking yourself, what makes me want to sit? What do I really love about this? What does it give me that I'm so grateful for, that I cherish, that is meaningful? So if you're in touch with what you love about it, then it circumvents the resistance of should, because you don't want to be trying to meditate because you think you should. You want to look at what inspires you to deepen in your spiritual practice. What inspires you to pray? Certainly for me, my relationship with prayer over the years has changed a great deal. I used to pray a lot for help with various things, and that was very useful, and I encourage you to do that if that feels right or meaningful to you. But sometimes prayer becomes, more non-linear. Like if your experience is becoming more non-dual, like you start to recognize that there's not a separate God, that who and what you are, who and what everything really is in and part of God, then sometimes the way we can pray more easily is just to turn our consciousness into a mantra, to intone any name of God, which is really what a mantra is, whether the mantra is Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha, or whether it's a set prayer like the Shema, or the Lord's Prayer, or the Serenity Prayer, or the Metta Prayer of loving kindness. It really doesn't matter. But as we pray, what we're really doing is we're turning our consciousness deep into the heart, and not just our personal heart, but the heart, the source of all love and compassion and goodness itself. And we're opening ourselves to connect to all the beings who've prayed that prayer. So whenever you work with a mantra, a Sanskrit mantra, or an ancient prayer, really what you're opening yourself to is all the love and the grace and the goodness and the spiritual support that is alive in that prayer, because it's a living stream of grace that's flown down through thousands of years and can flow to nourish and sustain you in this moment. A Course in Miracles says something very beautiful about saying any name of God. It goes like this: say God's name, and you invite the angels to surround the ground on which you stand, and spread their wings to keep you safe and shelter you from anything that would intrude upon your holiness. So meditate, pray, but also pay attention to rituals that are very ordinary, like going for a walk in nature, where you just stay with your breath and you sense the feet on the ground, and you take in through your senses, your immediate sensed experience, the fact that your body and your breath are not separate from everything that you see, that you are in and part of the grace that is this natural world, and that it is nourishing and sustaining to you, and can help to harmonize and balance you in times of stress and overwhelm, and bring you back into your natural condition. You could take any of the inquiries that you might find in a book like mine, The Way of Grace, and take it as a focus for a walking meditation. Like, what's it like if I open, soften, allow my experience exactly as it is? Or I go for a walk, you go for a walk with the line, what's holding me now? What's holding us all now? And if you were to stay with an inquiry line like that as you walk for half an hour, I guarantee you'll come back home in more presence, in more awakeness, in more of a felt awareness of being here in the now, and not just in this moment, but being in the now, the grace-centered now. So we want to engage all those little rituals, and even paying attention to ordinary things like taking a bath, things that help us to relax. Remember that what ego really is just layers and layers and layers of contraction around this conviction that you're a separate somebody who thinks it has to do it all and figure it all out on your own, which is what stress is. So anything that helps you to relax and settle is going to be helpful for making presence your priority so that you can stay calm and clear. That obviously is the basis for any beautiful, noble action. We also want to take ego relaxation breaks because in these times, so much of what's going on is very triggering and not easy. So you want to take breaks when you need them, when you find yourself getting overwhelmed or stressed or grief-stricken. All of those things are very normal human emotions in a circumstance like this. But we want to come back, to engage our resources, to come back to our natural condition. One way that I recommend you do that often is on the sanctuary of my website mirandamcpherson.com. Go into the sanctuary under audio meditations. There's a free downloadable, I call it the Ego Relaxation Reset, but it's titled Be As You Are with Ramana Maharshi's beautiful face next to it. And it guides you into the transmission of ego relaxation. It helps you let that being nothing, doing nothing, getting nothing, relaxing out of your ego activity and just letting everything return to the 0 point again, where you're just here, you're just in God. And so that just takes 5 minutes. You could lie on the floor and just let it all go in a Savasana. That isn't just physical, but it's whole being. And then after that, to just pop these 3 words into your consciousness, like dropping a penny into a still pond. What's needed now? Or if you like to do it more devotionally, move me into the words or the actions that best serve. And so when you relax egoically, relax out of the construct, I'm the doer, it's all up to me, I have to figure it out, I can't, and you feel scared and stressed. You come back recognizing that you're just here in the infinite, in and part of all that is. Then we can ask the infinite to move us, to guide us. We can listen. We can let what happens next, the responding to the emails, the looking at our finances, the taking stock of what's in the fridge and how best to get the groceries in the safest way possible, or whatever it is that's on your plate, how to stay afloat financially in these challenging times. We can look at that from within a clearer, more objective place inside. We have much more likelihood of finding the flow of the elegant, wise response in that situation, and doing so without so much flapping around, letting our doing, our actions happen from the ground of being, where grace always is. So I want to talk as well about the next most important principle, and that is about compassionately accepting and working with your human emotions. It still surprises me how common people seem to relate to human emotions like fear or insecurity or feeling overwhelmed or angry even as things that they should feel ashamed of, as some evidence that they're failing spiritually. And I really think that's a mistake. We are all human, and in times where there really is no normal anymore, in times where there is such loss and heartbreak and grief and uncertainty, it's very natural for waves of fear to arise, or to watch the TV and just start feeling angry at some of our leaders for what they're doing or not doing. And all of these things are very human, and I don't think that being a graceful human being or being a deep spiritual practitioner means not having those feelings. I think it's all about how we work with them. So when you understand that fear, which is really the root of most of our challenging human emotions, is an inevitable consequence of experiencing ourselves as separate, then we see that fear is really part of our survival instinct and that it serves us at times. So the issue really is we need to be able to discriminate between the wisdom of our survival instinct switching on fight or flight or triggering something, and the mind stream of fear that can have us contract into anxiety that doesn't allow us to sleep at night and that doesn't actually help us at all. So one of the things that I really recommend is to learn firstly to get grounded, and I've already covered how that might happen, using some of the practices that you'll find in the Way of Grace or some of the practices you might already have in your wonderful arsenal of spiritual understanding so far. And from there, learning to go towards your fear. Not bat it away, not dismiss it, not spiritual platitude it, not should on yourself. Actually inquire into your fear. What is it that you're really scared by? What is it that's difficult here? And so what you want to do is to explore that one fear at a time, one difficult emotion at a time. So if we're working with fear, to explore what exactly do I fear and name it. And then don't just tell a story about it, but inquire into who is it that is scared. So what do I mean by that question? Well, when you look at the mind stream of fear, anxiety-based fear, what you'll see is that when fear doesn't resolve, it belongs to a somebody, right? So fear only persists in relationship to a separate self, someone who takes themselves to be separate from the source of everything and thinks it has to figure it out and can't, and is then just immobilized by the fear. So sometimes we inherit fears, streams of fears, from traumas or difficulties our parents or our ancestors have gone through. And if that's the case, we want to understand that. If our fear has to do with difficult moments in our own history where something was really overwhelming and we weren't helped to feel secure or safe in our situation, then we want to understand that too. If the fear belongs to our tribe or our culture because of trauma we've been through as a culture, we want to understand that. So we want to understand our fear, not make ourselves wrong for it. We want to meet that with compassion and to breathe, to open, soften, allow space for our own humanity. So there's something really profound that happens when we go towards the fear with support and we understand it and we see who it belongs to and we let it all be met for what it is, just bringing it all to the light. There's something that St. Paul said in the Bible, in Ephesians. He said, everything exposed to the light itself becomes light. And so we'll see that's why it's such a powerful principle in many mystical traditions, as well as in some of the best psychological methodologies, that when we just bring things to awareness, something happens. Somehow grace finds us. Somehow there's dissolving of fear. Somehow our load is lightened. And somehow we naturally get through it. And we arrive in the direct, truth, felt understanding that there's nothing to fear, that there is human suffering, there are difficulties, there are challenges, but that somehow there's something alive in the space beyond our thoughts about who we are, our thoughts about what the world is, and fear itself. So that's even a line of inquiry you might want to explore. What's alive in the space beyond me and my fear? And so if you learn to work with the energy of the fear rather than tell the story about it and try to figure it out, which is what your ego is always trying to do, have another strategy for it. If you go towards it, name it, see it, understand it, open even into the energy, the shakiness, the insecurity, and don't turn it into a problem with your mind. Open, soften, allow it, stay present. This is the practice of ego relaxation, and it's very powerful. It melts ego contraction, and it propels us into a whole other galaxy of freedom and wisdom. So, the fourth thing about embodying grace in uncertain times is really about learning to accept impermanence. When you really think about it, this world has always been a realm of impermanence. Everything changes, everything fluctuates, everything that is born dies at some point. This is not an easy truth to accept, but if we can open to the fact that it's the nature of this world to change and fluctuate, then it helps us to somehow find equanimity and peace in these times of immense change at this moment, and to not resist quite as much. So if we can regard life and our life, both our personal situation and our collective situation, as a divine classroom, the real issue is, are you being a good student? Are you willing to be open to what is it that I'm being asked to learn here? What is it that is growing me? How am I being asked to change? Can I say yes to that rather than no to that? Ego always says no. That's its default. Resistance, more contraction. Let's go back to what we know when it feels like I was in control. But evolving spiritually means learning to say yes to what's asked of us, to lean into it, to accept it, to allow things to be as they are. What helps us most with this? Well, what helps us is to recognize that in our experience, there's always what I call the content of experience, thoughts, feelings, emotions, challenges, issues, states, conditions, things going on. But if you step back a little bit from just the enmeshment with the content of whatever's happening for you, and you step in, back, and wide, you kind of feel that energetic shift. In, back, wide, as if your consciousness deepens and expands and is so much bigger than just the head and the body. You're actually in and part of everything, as if all the back of your chakras are just portals to the infinite, right? And as if your feet are grounded, as if they're integrated into an infinite mountain that has no circumference, right? And as if your heart backs onto an infinite galaxy, right? That's actually how I feel, and how I know you're going to feel in the course of time too. But for now, if you just back in, back and wide, and you just notice the awareness, right, that's witnessing all of this. Who is it that's experiencing ups and downs and emotions and fears and concerns, excitement, right? Who is it that is the one who has been experiencing everything all this time? Who is it in you that doesn't have an age, that doesn't have a gender, that doesn't have a shape, that doesn't have a boundary? Who is this I really? Not just the me, but who is this I? If you just feel into that, it's quite natural to sense, oh yeah, there I am. It's not the personality I, it's the I of God, the non-dual expanse of consciousness that is pure witness, pure awareness. And that as we be with not only the content of what's happening, but also with that broader witness consciousness that always is, then we have much more capacity to be equanimous with our situation, to accept it, to flow with it, to not resist it so much, to be open to the invitations it contains, and to be a good student in God's classroom. So, the fifth most important thing about living gracefully in uncertain times is obviously, I think pretty obvious, and that is to serve someone. In these times, what I find so beautiful so far is seeing so many beautiful acts of kindness coming forth in ordinary ways. Friends checking in on friends, people in the local neighborhood, young people asking who are the elders in our neighborhood, can we go grocery shopping for them? You know, I think it's so important that we act on what it is that we're all feeling, which is that we are in this together. And it is really through the combination of the resource of our spiritual practices and also our loving care for one another, and rising to act on that loving care in any way that we possibly can. That's not only going to help us get through this, but that's going to evolve us out of the degree of self-centeredness that we've all been living in for far too long. It's very obvious that whatever comes next, our world is going to be a much better one when we really act and live from the understanding that everything we think and say and do has an impact, either a beautiful impact or a polluting impact. And let's face it, our world does not need any more pollution of any kind. But it needs more of that beautiful fragrance that comes from love, from human empathy, from the willingness to serve one another wherever we can. So it doesn't have to be grand. In these times, it could be as simple as just contemplating who within your purview, within the people in your life, maybe someone who you go to a service with, someone who cuts your hair, who's very likely having a very hard time at this moment financially, whether maybe you could pay for their service in advance to help them get by, whether someone you know who's lost their job, if you're financially okay and haven't lost yours, what about buying their groceries for a week or paying their rent this month if you can? What about simply putting in a few more phone calls or Zooms or FaceTimes to anyone you know who lives alone and who is likely really having a much harder time of this social distancing? Because let's face it, it's not really good for us on an emotional, psychological or spiritual level to not be able to touch one another. That's really hard. And we're likely to be seeing a lot more depression and loneliness and mental health issues because of that as this goes on. So what is it that you could do that is an embodiment of the truth and the goodness and the beauty of your heart? And do it. Take an action every day that propagates love and goodness and truth and humanity. It's really in giving to one another that we receive. And St. Francis in his prayer spoke of that very beautifully. I actually prefer Mother Teresa's version of his prayer. She says, "When I am hungry, give me someone that I can feed. And when my cross is too heavy and its burden that I cannot bear, bring me someone who needs some understanding, who needs and deserves to be loved, just as I do. Give me someone I can serve." So we can all rise to that depth of beauty in an ordinary way in our lives. And lastly, I think most importantly, let us remember always, as we take refuge in whatever practices help us to rest in God, to rest and immerse and marinate in the truth, the source of it all, as a gift for everyone. Remember that your spiritual practice, your love is service, and that in these times that are unprecedented across the world, we need not only to engage the practices and the methodologies and the wisdom that we can for our own peace of mind, but so that our way of being becomes a shelter for others, a refuge for others, a place where others can find peace and rest, that together we may serve not only one another but this world to find a new possibility for us to be the most beautiful, noble, graceful human beings and live into our spiritual destiny and help our world be born again each time we rest. So, my dear friends, I hope this that I've shared has been supportive to you, nourishing to you, helpful to you. And I also want to share that given that I'm not able to do what I do in the world so much, which is lead in-person events and retreats, I'm stepping it up, but broadcasting and going virtual. So I have 2 virtual retreats coming up in the next couple of months, and I hope you'll consider joining me. The first one is designed mostly for Europeans, but it is doable if you live in California or America. And that is on the theme Embodying Grace in Uncertain Times, where in the course of 5 days we'll go much deeper into all of this and then a lot more. And that takes place on April the 27th through May the 1st. I've done my best to make this really affordable, so it will be affordable for most people, and if we get a good response, I'm hoping to be able to give some scholarships to anyone who's lost their job due to COVID-19 for these. And there's another one coming up, and the theme for that virtual retreat, which is designed mostly for Americans in all American time zones, is called Wake Up and Love. That surely is the curriculum. That will be May 25th through May 29th. And we're putting the details up on my website in the coming days. So please just contact mirandamcpherson.com or check mirandamcpherson.com, my website, in the coming days for further details. Or you could email info@mirandamcpherson.com if you want to know more about that. So again, just please remember that there are so many resources for you in the sanctuary of my website, mirandamcpherson.com. Go into the sanctuary, there's tons of things to support you at this time. And also my Facebook page, Miranda McPherson Teachings, where I post all sorts of updates and where you can join others who are studying and practicing the way of grace and wanting to stay close to these teachings and become the embodiments of grace that we were all designed to be. So all my love and my support to you and your loved ones, and may peace prevail through our world.